Welcome to the official YouTube channel The Gaming Hub. In this episode we will discuss about Harvestella review. If you like farming sims and have some free time on your hands, Harvestella is worth looking into, though it's far from flawless. Harvestella is a title that has, since its reveal, gathered a significant amount of both expectation and curiosity, mainly thanks to its visuals and premise. But does Square Enix's new life simulation RPG manage to make its mark through the seasons? And what about the Switch? Can the console bring the best out of the game? After a few hours spent in its gorgeous universe, it soon became clear that Harvestella is one of those titles that is more than a mere video game, feeling akin to actually having a second job to perform in your leisure time. You see, not only do you have a classic action JRPG going on, there is a farming sim, a time cycle to consider, nutrition, crafting, fishing, side quests and dungeons, plus you have to save the entire goddamn world. Thankfully, due to the enjoyable way it is implemented, Square Enix just about stick the landing to form a mostly cohesive whole. Harvestella is a jack of two trades, but a master of neither. Part action RPG, part farming sim, it's a game that tries to blend two very different styles of gameplay, and for the most part it does so successfully, or at least successfully enough that it's always enjoyable on at least a fundamental level. At the same time, however, neither aspect of the experience feels like it's fleshed out enough, which means that Harvestella is never anything beyond predictably satisfying in any of its core mechanics, and often with plenty of rough edges. Harvestella is set in a fantasy world where four giant, intricate crystals dictate the passage of seasons, each found in a different part of the world. Lately, however, these crystals, known as sea slights, have been acting up, which has resulted in a frequent occurrence called a quietus, a one-day event where the air is filled with a deadly dust that anyone who comes into contact with will die, forcing people indoors. Amidst all this, you step into the shoes of an amnesiac protagonist, because of course the protagonist has to be amnesiac, found unconscious in a tranquil village right in the middle of a quietus, completely untouched by its deadly effects. You kick things off with a time-honored RPG cliché of amnesia-addled protagonist becoming drawn into a plot involving magical crystals and impending doom. You can pick your gender and design your pawn using the relatively limited options available. You set up shop on the outskirts of town and are drip-fed the various mechanics that make the Harvestella world go around. You work within a 30-day cycle in which you need to become a veritable anime Mr. Fothergill, raising all manner of crops which vary according to your experience level and the time of season. Eventually you are given a fairy recipe book that allows you to craft all manner of foodstuffs. These recipes are important as they are crucial to progression in the action sections, but ticking off dishes also unlocks upgrades to your farm and farming equipment, in turn making you a more effective and efficient farmer. Eventually, after upgrading your gaff, you even get to keep livestock, namely the winsome cloughfowl and woolum. Not only are they adorbs, but they are also a staggeringly effective way of making some sweet side hustle cash, thanks to their eggs and milk. Harvestella's story has some interesting ideas and ropes in some intriguing elements, like time travel, for instance, while its fantasy world also feels surprisingly rich and fleshed out. Of course, I don't want to overstate things. The story is fine for what it is, if not extraordinary by any stretch of the imagination. It does a decent job of keeping you invested, and if nothing else, it's far more comprehensive than what you'd ordinarily find in games where one of your primary focuses is farming. For the most part, the story doesn't feel like it interrupts the relaxed farming gameplay loop too much either though. Conversely, that relaxed structure does impact the story's pacing at times. The action sections are arguably the most enjoyable and impressive part of the package. Your avatar travels between the several charming towns, interacting with the many NPC denizens, and in turn learning new recipes, stuff to farm, and side quests. Dungeons are done against the clock, and generally speaking cannot be done in one run as you become exhausted and conk out at midnight. You have to plan each dungeon crawl wisely, ensuring that you take the right combo of food and drink with you to maintain stamina. Combat is not a complex beast, but the ability to change classes or jobs on the fly makes it interesting and allows you to pick the best and most effective way of dispatching enemies. Evasive techniques can be unlocked on each job skill tree. However, it is a far from effective dash maneuver, which when combined with the lack of a block means that defensively you are left a tad exposed. Thankfully, things are too difficult to negotiate. Boss battles are fun and not too demanding. It is all a bit of a lesson in button bashing, with cooldown periods between attacks, and a focus on exploiting enemies' elemental weaknesses. Think Xenoblade Light and you are just about there. On the gameplay front, Harvestella invokes a similar response. It's perfectly serviceable, and for the most part, even enjoyable, even if it's not exactly remarkable. Half of this game is modeled after games like Harvest Moon and Rune Factory. It's a farming sim, as I've mentioned a couple of times, where you're focused on maintaining and expanding a farm, tilling and watering the soil, planting seeds and harvesting crops, and once you've unlocked the ability to do so, tend to livestock. The in-game time moves forward constantly, and you have a limited amount of time each day before you have to return home and go back to sleep, which means you have to decide which tasks to prioritize and which long-term goals you want to work towards. Meanwhile, Harvestella also allows you to explore the town where you've made your home and get to know its denizens. That is done through side quests, which tend to focus on various NPCs and party members, and while I wouldn't exactly describe any of them as standouts or highlights of the game, there are enough good ones to make sure that side quests don't feel like a hindrance, even though side quest design and structure at its core mostly tends to be pretty rote. Improving your relationships and bonds with characters is also something that Harvestella lets you do, as farming sims often do. And while the game's cast doesn't have any characters that will live long in memory, the activity at its core is engaging enough. All the expected gameplay mechanics are here, from keeping an eye on your stamina throughout the day and being able to upgrade and improve your house to gathering resources and crafting useful new equipment and more, though Harvestella tends to keep things simplistic for the most part. It never feels too restrictive, and the tools it affords to expand your farm and improve the efficiency of your farming feel valuable, but if you're expecting something that rivals the depth of, say, Harvest Moon's farming sim mechanics, you'll be left wanting. There is a lot of talky, textual RPG 101 sections to negotiate. Weirdly, there is no voice acting other than a few cursory expository inclusions here and there. Good job. The music is a warm, cuddly Uematsu light treat. As formulaic as the main plot is, there is also a distinct undercurrent of melancholy at play with some maudlin, heartstring-tugging subplots amidst the RPG bluster. Where Harvestella falls down is a strict adherence to the timer. It ticks away constantly, even when you are playing side quests. Having to repeatedly return to dungeons will grate on some, although you can unlock teleportation and waypoints, and even add bridges and ladders to shorten the distance you have to travel. Some may also balk at the performance in the looks department. The 2D artwork is utterly sublime, and the game generally looks easy on the eye. However, some sections, in particular the world map, are curiously blurry. If you can overlook these issues, and are a fan of stuff like Rune Factory, Stardew Valley or even the slept on level 5 title Fantasy Life, the latter a definite kindred spirit in terms of its JRPG tropes, action, farming and jobs, then you will get a lot out of Harvestella. The other half of Harvestella is an action RPG, though perhaps calling it referring to it as an action RPG light would be far more accurate. Nothing exemplifies that better than the game's combat, which is disappointingly straightforward and limited. Combat is a very simplistic hack and slash affair, so simplistic that it doesn't even allow the ability to dodge. You have a few abilities that you have on cooldown, and there are multiple classes to play as, though the progression, too, feels half-baked. Classes end up feeling bland and, often, not too unique, while combat ends up feeling like a chore. Exploring dungeons and other locations over the course of several in-game days, as such, also feels like a significantly weaker part of Harvestella's gameplay structure, owing to how much more focused it is on combat. Meanwhile, when it comes to visuals, I'm honestly conflicted about how I feel about Harvestella, because while there are aspects of how the game looks that I truly appreciate, others are shockingly subpar. Where its art design is concerned, there's a lot to like about Harvestella. Its setting isn't going to pull up any trees in the fantasy genre, but you can see that this is clearly a game where the art department had an absolute field day. From a technical perspective though, it's absurdly lackluster. Things looks muddy, environments and models are lacking in detail, the animations are stiff and wonky, and everything just looks choppy and blurry. Though there are sights in Harvestella that might be gorgeous when viewed in their concept art form, in a much more real sense, the game itself doesn't look great. All the expected gameplay mechanics are here, from keeping an eye on your stamina throughout the day and being able to upgrade and improve your house too. Gathering resources and crafting useful new equipment and more, though Harvestella tends to keep things simplistic for the most part. It never feels too restrictive, and the tools it afford to expand your farm and improve the efficiency of your farming feel valuable, but if you're expecting something that rivals the depth of, say, Harvest Moon's farming sim mechanics, you'll be left wanting. The other half of Harvestella is an action RPG, though perhaps referring to it as an action RPG light would be far more accurate. Nothing exemplifies that better than the game's combat, which is disappointingly straightforward and limited. Combat is a very simplistic hack and slash affair, so simplistic that it doesn't even allow the ability to dodge. You have a few abilities that you have on cooldown, and there are multiple classes to play as, though the progression, too, feels half-baked. Classes end up feeling bland and, often, not too unique, while combat ends up feeling like a chore. Exploring dungeons and other locations over the course of several in-game days, as such, also feels like a significantly weaker part of Harvestella's gameplay structure, owing to how much more focused it is on combat. Meanwhile, when it comes to visuals, I'm honestly conflicted about how I feel about Harvestella, because while there are aspects of how the game looks that I truly appreciate, others are shockingly subpar. Where its art design is concerned, there's a lot to like about Harvestella. Its setting isn't going to pull up any trees in the fantasy genre, but you can see that this is clearly a game where the art department had an absolute field day. From a technical perspective though, it's absurdly lackluster. Things looks muddy, environments and models are lacking in detail, the animations are stiff and wonky, and everything just looks choppy and blurry. Though there are sights in Harvestella that might be gorgeous when viewed in their concept art form, in a much more real sense, the game itself doesn't look great. Thanks for watching this video, and do comment on this video and stay tuned for our next update about current trendings and tops.
Good morning! Now it's my turn! We're both just humans. I don't know what you think, but I feel calm around you for some reason. I really like that about you.
Harvestella.